please welcome on stage Volker Gruhn, co-founder and chairman of the supervisory board of adesso. Welcome. Pascal Bauer, who's the lead data analytics and research at the DFB. And Dominic Habenstein, sports performance lead of adesso. Welcome on stage.
Hi, thank you to have us here.
Let's start into the presentation.
All right, let's go. Hand over to you.
Yeah, so with all the innovations you've seen in the last days, I think it is clear that the problem we have as a DFB is no longer that we don't have enough data, right? All the data are there, and if you see, like, limb tracking is a big topic, which increases the amount of data per match to up to 500 million data points. The challenge for us with the...
Thank you so much, Shelley and Dave. It was a great round. So we heard about the NHL. That means we are going into the direction of what it's all about in the afternoon. It will be all about the US Major Leagues. Preparations is a good word. You can see in the background that we are changing the field of play for the NFL game in the afternoon. And now we continue with the topic of collecting data, statements on a future-proof data and IT setup. And those are the following panelists. So please welcome on stage Volker Gruhn, co-founder and chairman of the supervisory board of adesso. Welcome. Pascal Bauer, who's the lead data analytics and research at the DFB. And Dominic Habenstein, sports performance lead of adesso. Welcome on stage.
Hi, thank you to have us here.
Let's start into the presentation.
All right, let's go. Hand over to you.
Yeah, so with all the innovations you've seen in the last days, I think it is clear that the problem we have as a DFB is no longer that we don't have enough data, right? All the data are there, and if you see, like, limb tracking is a big topic, which increases the amount of data per match to up to 500 million data points. The challenge for us with the DFB is rather to follow that pace of new technologies with our analytics department, right? So what we got is a digital reproduction of every match in a granularity and frequency growing impressively fast. We got a digital reproduction of training data, and we also see that in the amateur and youth level, the granularity of data that is available is growing more and more. Like, we got in the DFB in youth and amateur level in the middle of the season up to 80,000 matches played per weekend. And for every match, we got basic event data right now, which is very basic. But if you see how many camera installations there are on amateur pitches and how companies are able to collect tracking data, positional data out of basic video footage like that, I think it's going to be exciting, but also challenging to see how this trend develops in the next years.
Yeah, let me just maybe add something quite quick. These are the performance data, and of course, you know, there's way more, like all the medical stuff, all the mental load, and so on and so on. And combining these data is the most challenging part. So let's talk about the next topic, like the silos. Maybe you want to hand over.
Yeah, leave the silos, build a platform. That's one of our 4 topics that we have in that panel. And the question, Dominic, is what conditions do you mostly face at sport clubs, sport organizations?
Yep. Then let's start with that. On the club side, it's mainly the same providers that Pascal mentioned at a part, but combined with a lot of specific technologies, self-captured data, and as well some more scouting stuff. The main problem is, if we have a look on the architectures in the clubs, that there are still a lot of standalone systems. So the standalone systems are not fully connected to the main software part. The main software can be a football intelligence tool or an own sports data hub. But the main challenge is to combine all these data in one place and give the opportunity to make visualizations out of it. that leads to the situation that you have data silos and knowledge silos in the club. The data silos leads to the problem that you have isolated analytics and not combined analytics. You cannot link, connect data, and so on. That might lead to a disadvantage, a competitive disadvantage. And the knowledge silos just take into account that you have an analyst or a coach that is responsible for one of these technologies and owns the knowledge about this technology, and he leaves the club, then you have the risk or run the risk of data graveyards or technology graveyards. So in the end, what you need to do is find a good solution to logically link it, compare it, and make it available for everyone who needs it. Yeah, and that across all providers and all technologies.
So it's clear that the sports organizations have to orchestrate the diversity of data. But Pascal, let's have a step back maybe. How diverse is the data landscape that you are working on?
I think we, as the DFB or as a federation in general, are kind of in a unique position since we wear multiple hats in the landscape. So we host competitions like the DFB Cup, the Third League, the Women's Bundesliga on our own. So we are the host of these competitions. So we can decide which tracking vendors we install in the stadiums, so which providers we choose. But we got to provide then the data and the services to media companies or to our media department, to our match organization department, but also from the performance perspective to the clubs. But there are other competitions like the big FIFA and UEFA competitions like the upcoming European Championship where we just participate. So the only thing we can do is wait which data provider UEFA or FIFA chooses in that case, and then we got to be able to handle those data sources. Then we got a couple of national team matches where we kind of participate but also host, so we can collect our own data. And of course, as a national team or as a federation, we got our players only 10 to 20% of the time of the year with the national team. And the rest of the time, the players are with their clubs. So we're obviously also interested in data from Bundesliga, Premier League, or other top European leagues where our players are playing, where we also have no chance to decide who is the tracking provider. Fortunately, we got a good relationship to the DFL where we discuss with them and try to ensure consistency across at least the German competitions. But at the end of the day, for us, the challenge is that we got to take vendor or data provider-wise what we get. So we almost got to handle all tracking providers, which is on the one hand a technical challenge to bring them all in the same format, make the data comparable, which is very tricky. And also with the fact that we were multiple hats, that we got to serve performance sides, media sides, and match operation sides. It's an organizational challenge to avoid silos, the silos that Dominic mentioned, and to use synergies across those departments because the data pipeline is the same for all end users.
Data cannot score, but it can boost efficiency. That's the next statement you brought us. Clear that one of the main quick wins of the centralized data platform is that you can automate repetitive tasks. That's right. Can you give us an example, Pascal, how automation is making your work easier?
Yeah, not directly my work, but work of experts in our department. And maybe some of you who attended the SportsInnovation 2 years ago might remember this slide, because together with Hendrik Weber on stage, Sportec Solutions and TSG Hoffenheim, we presented kind of a technology or an algorithm that basically detected match phases like a build-up, a counter-press, a counter-attack live for one of the innovation matches here on stage. And with this kind of automatization in place, this is still a cool use case for us, because every video analyst within the DFB, we can save them a couple of days of time for otherwise tagging those match phases on their own manually. All right? So it's not a fancy use case, and this is just one example with the match phase detection for the video analyst. We get a couple of other examples for other experts like the fitness coaches and stuff. But this is not fancy because you don't see a difference on the pitch. The players are still doing the same, but it just makes the background processes that are invisible for the visitor way more effective.
You almost always need more data than you think. Coming to you, Volker, what framework conditions need to be considered when dealing with AI and ML solutions?
Generally speaking, I think data is a rare value in all these different use cases. In a number of really different situations, really looking at not sport situations, the promise is the more data you have, the more information you can get. And that's something you more or less can take for sure. I think in the sports activity, we have to distinguish it a little bit more carefully. So on the one hand side, that's what we learned in our earlier remarks. You have really plenty of data sources, and these data have to be integrated. To some extent, looking at all these matches and match scenes, there may even be some sort of data fog, and it's crucial to identify what's really crucial for identifying what's going on and what's just noise, not really needed and valuable for any case of use case. For all other situations, whenever you think that a single point of data is valuable, then it's generally true that you need more of them, more of the same type in order to identify clusters or classes or anomalies, things like that. And then it's really difficult to get all that data points, integrate them in a single database or wherever in order to come up with some integrated use cases and evaluations in terms of machine learning, deep learning, whatever AI techniques available.
Where does machine learning end and AI begins?
So machine learning is a part of AI. So that's rather clear. And machine learning, as far as and it's true for the rest of AI as well, is applied mathematics, just to take the magic out of it. Yeah? It's statistics, linear algebra, stochastics, things like that. And it's no magic at all. Yeah? It's just applying available algorithms to existing sets of data. So it's rather simple, but, and that makes a difference, in the recent years it becomes available to more or less any programmer because infrastructures, platforms by big tech are made available, so everybody can apply these AI techniques. But machine learning, to answer your question concretely, is the first step on the AI path.
Dominic, let's continue with the next one. Anything to add to those points?
Yeah, so here we see, I really want to make that point, the European AI Act, which is considered as a regulation. It's a regulation, definitely. But for my liking, it's more a chance and a danger, because I believe that these data issues have to be regulated, otherwise people are fearful. And I think the AI Act, perhaps a little bit over-engineered, perhaps, I'm not sure, perhaps it's a little bit over-engineered, but it provides some basis for these regulation issues. And that's what Europe usually works like. So have some regulation, and the rest of the markets and the rest of the world markets try to orient themselves if that's a valuable approach or not. And if you want to act on the European market with any AI application, you have to respect this AI Act and its consequences. And so I believe it might foster the European situation and the European competitive advantage of providers.
Maybe let me just add one thing about the fear. I feel like a bit of a paradox on the markets. On the one hand, there are more and more really ambitious and interesting AI solutions coming up in sports. But on the other hand, the target group for these technologies is maybe a bit overwhelmed or maybe a bit not totally AI ready. So I feel like the first thing we might do is get a deeper understanding of the technologies or the solutions, because if you keep in mind, it's quite hard to understand what happens to sensitive player data if you feed an LLM with it.
Point, yeah.
So, or another part, how reliable is the output, the outcome? And to help organizations at first to understand what's going on there seems like the first task or first to do for us.
If I can add a comment, I think that's really crucial. So to apply these new techniques needs some technology understanding. That's really a baseline. That's definitely needed. But if you only have this technology understanding and you don't understand the application domain, you come up with fancy experiments which do not have any value. So here we have really bring together people from the technology area and from the application domain. So here from sports. And bring these people together and make it happens that they talk to each other and understand what the true challenges are. That's really what's the focus point of our daily business.
Pascal, how many, let me call it, lack of knowledge do you see in that relation?
Well, I think in sports in general or in football, this is even a bigger challenge for us. Like you said, it's getting easier for developers with all the tool sets available to build their own machine learning models without a solid statistic education. The step before is maybe, we often call it data literacy, that you got customers who got to take the outcomes of these models and apply them into their domain or into their daily life, right? And we got an example here in terms of data mindedness, which is maybe even a step before, which is relevant for us, that we kind of, or my role in the DFB since 5 years is, I would say 60% of the time I spend to convince coaches that they can use data and facts and evidence we provide to support their gut instincts based on which they make or made their decisions. And maybe one simple example where we had so many learnings is kind of the strategy of postmarking. Many of you might know what it is and might have realized that you see it less in the last years in football. Like when you defend the corner attack, you got to take the decision as a coach whether to place 1 or 2 players on the post or whether to place more players into that bulk which you see on the figure so that there is a higher probability that they can clear the ball. And what we realize is that there are a lot of old coaches, often former players, that stick so hard to that postmarking pattern, regardless on which data analysis we provide them, showing them based on 50,000 corners that there is a significant difference. And you can then claim and say, hey, they got to understand what we do, but we wanted to understand where that comes from, why they stick so much with emotions to that pattern. And if you think about it, like all the coaches, they typically watch, I would say 80% of the time, they watch highlight clips of Bundesliga of a weekend and not the full match, which means that you see only a small fraction of the corners that are happening there. And what you see, or also what you remember from your experience as a player, is probably rather goals being scored after corners, which often occur close to the posts, where a player could stand, and then the first thinking they have is, hey, if they would have postmarked that, the goal would have been safe. Or what you see is a player clearing the ball on the goal line. What you will never see on a highlight clip, or what you will never remember from your career, from your matches, is one more player in the bulk clearing a simple ball, right? Sure. So we always got to see both perspectives, and there we had a lot of learnings to, on the one hand, try to educate the coaches, make them data literate, but on the other hand, also understand where their thinking comes from and understand the human biases that are just natural that we also have as statisticians in order to kind of bridge that gap and come to an alignment altogether.
But is there still room for feelings, intuition, things like that?
I would say definitely yes, right?
Okay.
So what we always say, we got the coach's experience or feelings or gut instincts, but we want to support them with data and evidence, right? This is just one more perspective we give them. And to be fair, like football is such a complex game compared to maybe baseball or basketball, where from a data perspective, you understand pretty clearly what's happening. We're by far not there in soccer. In football, there are many situations where we can't derive an insight from the data and say to coach, hey, it would have been clearly better to pass that ball instead of dribble. So we just can't give them all the recommendations why they need to rely on something else than on data for their decisions, and then they got to stick to their feelings, gut instincts, experience, however you want to call it.
Volker, can you give us an insight into the organizational setup for data-driven enterprises and products?
So perhaps not in detail, but I can promise you something. The development of data-driven systems or AI-based systems in general is truly different from developing information systems. And what developers around the world and in companies and clubs do through their daily life for the last decades is developing information systems in the area of fan engagement, for instance. And they do that in a completely different way. In this data-oriented, data-driven development way, people have to take care of data pipelines, where to get the data from, checking if there are biases in these data, how other data can be extended or complemented, whatever. And all this is a truly different approach in terms of architecture, in terms of software architecture, software processes, and in terms of capacities and competencies. That means, and that's really, I think, a crucial finding, you can't take your developers you have in one department and tell them, hey, go ahead and go for data-driven development. They don't have the competencies to do so. So that's a different sort of business. And the picture in the background just tries to show that there are a number of people in different roles. And these different roles have to be available. Otherwise, you're more or less lost. And it's different, it stays different, and you can't take the same people.
Do we have more examples, Dominic, in the presentation?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you can add that as well. It's more like how to come to domain orientation. So how to deal with the sports department and the IT department, how to find a good setup. So having the governance part where like the whole platform and so on, where from legal stuff until the department up to the IT sits together. You have the part of the platform where, for example, let's say one of the big cloud solutions is set it up, but you also need the domain-driven department, so where you really have like the competencies out of the sports over there, and combine that with data engineering skills, and find a good setup in a club. It's not that easy, as you know, because sometimes, and not all of the clubs, of course, do have their own sports IT, have their general IT, and finding a good solution how the sports and the IT work together is a challenge, and so this is the idea of it. Maybe Volker, you want to add or explain some more?
It shows once again that you need people understanding what's really going on and what the valuable use cases are. So these data engineers or data analysts have to understand what the data business is on the one hand side, but they also have to understand what sports is and what's really, truly valuable data, and to distinguish fog from information. And that's something which needs both routings in technologies, in data business, and in domain understanding. And if you look at companies in general or in clubs in our particular setting, then that's really a difficult setting, because people come along with a different background, with a different attitude, and they don't valuable data in the same extent when they were looking for information systems for the last decades of the business.
So, Pascal,
and that makes it difficult.
Sorry, Volker, I don't want to interrupt you. Maybe you can add that, but if you see these roles and think about a data scientist, data analyst, data engineer, you sometimes have people that have to do all these roles in one person. And this is such a challenge. So I don't know how you recognize it.
So I want to bring up 2 points here. One is like the core competency in a football club or federation will never be an IT setup or a perfect data pipeline. So a very, very challenging question for us and for many other clubs is, what should we buy externally, like from partners or build with partners like adesso or others? And which competencies in the IT sector do we need in-house really? And there, like the role of a data scientist, that is the second point. I've very often seen that in clubs, like the decision makers hear that data science is a cool thing, we can derive insights. Then they hire a data scientist in the club, and then the data scientist realizes that there is no database. And then he realizes that
he's the only one.
He's the only one, and he has to set up the database, do the data engineering, and then the decision maker is wondering why there is no insight for the coach coming up after half a year, right? So this is a crucial thing where we try to think about, and we are not perfectly there yet, which parts do we gotta take care of internally with intern resources. I would see the data scientist, because he's interacting with the coaches directly, as one role internally. But what else do we need, and what can we buy from the market or from vendors or from real IT experts, which we will never be as a football federation, basically?
Is there a correlation between being professional on the field and being professional at the IT setup? What I want to ask is it a question of budget at the end?
The IT setup or the performance on the field?
The IT setup, of course. That's what we are talking about. Is it a question of money, or is it more a question of being open for the topic and realizing how important it is?
Yes.
That's it?
I think it's a question of being open to new technologies, being interested in understanding opportunities. And of course, you have to have some sort of professionalism to install all that in a professional way. But if that is given, it's more a question of attitude than of money. My liking, I'm not sure about that.
I feel the same, because if you think about what makes you to accept the technology, I guess it's at least ease of use and your own personal benefits. So these are important factors. And in sports, we often have the point that you don't see what's happening behind the scenes. You see the dashboards, the visualization, and so on, but not the hard work behind it, how to get there. And sometimes you have to start with these quick wins. If you see this benefit for myself and the ease of use, then you get open-minded. And so the open-minded part is for me a really important part. But on the other hand, I think we need to give them the opportunity to like it and love it.
I would actually say that both is absolutely mandatory. So if you want to build a good IT setup so that you can really get insights out of the data that can be translated to the pitch, this costs money. Like all the great technologies we've seen the last days here, they cost money. A data pipeline, you need not only data scientists, you need engineers, you need architects. So if you really want to be serious with data analytics as a club or as a federation, you got to invest a huge amount of money. And on the other hand, like if you got a coach or a decision maker or expert who does not accept the data or does not use them at all, like all this investment is useless, right? So I would say you need this investment. You can't just hire one data scientist and think he will change the world. But on the other hand, you need an awareness or an openness from those people that actually make the decisions on the pitch, because otherwise, like all the insights you generate are not used or not applied anywhere.
And we see that in other industries. So the change from process-driven to data-driven is a difficult change. And difficult changes require change management. That goes not like that.
To put it all in a nutshell, finally, Dominic, what is the important thing when we look into the future?
Let's do it together when we look into the future. I mean, it's hard to say. So what time in the future?
But what's your wish for the next month? Your wish to clubs, to organizations?
No, to be honest, I think the main challenge is at the moment to challenge or get over the gap between from data to dashboard. Let me say it in this way. So how do I get all my data together? This is quite challenging for all the clubs. Because there are so many great technologies, and what is really hard is that every time that you mentioned it, new technologies are coming up. So you need to find and decide what new technology do I put into my architecture, what can't I do right now, what is too much. So I think the first thing is just to decide what is my basic setup, where do I want to go, how do I deal with new technologies, just get a good idea of it. And of course, the open-mindedness, we talked about that. I mean, they see it here quite obvious. We call it data-driven decisions, our team sport. It's a team sport. You need a lot of different expertises. So you need to get these expertises at one table, what means IT as well at the table. And in the end, so you need to find your way in how far you take other companies with you, so external companies. I'm sure, and I'm strongly mean that you as well need to be able as a club to run the systems as well. So you need the help, of course, but you need to be in some point able to handle all these technology as well. And yeah, in the end, it's written there, the related data, and that's the most important thing, needs to be in one place. Otherwise, we can't talk about AI solutions and so on. So that's a basic setup, and it's not everywhere set yet. But please, what do you think?
I would say what you need, or what you will see in 10 years in every club, and we see that development in other sports, we see it now in football, you need a skilled IT department with data scientists, engineers that set up that infrastructure. You need data literate experts, so that you got people that understand the outcomes of those models and translate it on the pitch. This is also a thing that's coming naturally. We got data literacy education in the coaching education parts in German football, so that will come naturally over the years. I think one very crucial challenge for the future that people often forget is that mathematically, or from a machine learning perspective, we are not yet there that we understand that match. It's just more complicated than football. It's more American football. It's more complicated than basketball, than baseball.
Absolutely.
We need 5 to 10 more years to actually use those data and understand that match from a statistical perspective, so that we can give clear recommendations to a coach and say, hey, in this situation, with a pass to that player, the probability of scoring a goal is getting higher. I think this is from my perspective, speaking as a data scientist, the biggest challenge where we should focus on in the next years. And the rest comes naturally, I would say.
So it's still a long way to go, a lot of challenges, but we're wishing you all the best for those challenges and all the energy. Thank you so much. Dominic Habenstein, Pascal Bauer, Professor Dr. Volker Gruhn. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.